Hi, my name is Kim Marie Johnson, and Diane and Michel have asked me to come to talk to you tonight about prepping for emergencies. And I call my presentation Just in Case, No Fear Preparing for Emergencies. And the reason I say no fear is because we are in the hands of God, and we don't have to be afraid of anything that's coming. Before we start, let's pray if you don't mind. Father, I praise you for your mercy and your grace, and I praise you for the opportunity to be here tonight. I thank you for each and every person who's watching, Lord. And I hope that someone sees what they need to see, that someone hears the information that they need to hear. And most of all, God, I just ask you to get me out of the way and present this to them in your words, your way, and your timing, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. In recent years, people who are called hoarders have given a very negative connotation to prepping. But they're vastly different. Hoarding and prepping are not the same thing. Prepping is certainly not bad for small or large farmers who preserve their crops. It wasn't bad for our American ancestors, or indeed European ancestors, or anyone in the past thousands of years who had ways to put up their food. It is a good way to save your crops from one time of the month to another in the seasons. Now, I want to read you, because in Genesis 41, our Bible tells us that Joseph and the Pharaoh prepped for 7 years during the good white times in order that the 7 years of drought came, they would be prepared for the emergency of the drought. And because they were obedient, not only was Egypt saved, but surrounding countries, and Joseph's own family was saved. By the way, that's how the Jews got into Egypt. That's how the Jews came to Egypt, and back then they were friends. But let me just read this part to you. Pharaoh had a dream. In fact, he had a couple of dreams, and he didn't understand them. And Joseph was called out to interpret the dream. And as he interpreted, he told him not only that there was going to be 7 good years, but 7 years of drought. But he told him what God wanted him to do. And this is Genesis 41, 32. And for that the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice. It is because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. If you'll note, all through God's word, he confirms everything a second time. Now therefore let Pharaoh look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up the 5th part of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years. And let them gather all the food of those good years that come, and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. And that food shall be for store to the land against the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land perish not through the famine. Now, as we know, Pharaoh put Joseph in charge, and this was exactly what God had intended. This is exactly what God had in mind. But if you'll notice, he didn't just give him a dream that he needed interpretation for. He actually told him what to do about it, because God will do that. Now, I want you to know that today, people all over the world are feeling like God is talking to them and telling them that it is time to prepare. And if you feel like that, as I do, deep in my spirit, I feel like God says every day, prepare, prepare, prepare. Now, why? Why do you need to put up groceries and other things? Walmart is just about 7 miles from my house. Either way I want to go, I have a Walmart. Why do we want to prepare? Well, if you were looking at the way the prices are going up, that may be good enough reason right there. Cocoa, potatoes, rice, all these things that a lot of us consider staples are disappearing off the shelves when they come back. I just bought some ranch dressing, and I usually buy about 5 bottles at a time. The bottle is half as big as it was. No kidding. Half as big. So when something disappears off the shelf, a lot of times it's not because it was sold out, but because the company removed it from the shelves. When they bring it back, either the price is higher, the product is smaller in the packaging, or both. And so we're seeing prices increase and increase and increase. That's one reason that you need to prepare. Anything that you put away for later is going to help you. Now, when you prepare and when you put up groceries, let's say that you prepare for 3 days. That's an emergency. If your lights go out because somebody has a wreck and hits a pole, they can't get the lights back on for some reason, 3 days of supplies is very good for you. I don't know about you, but I have grandchildren, and if you go to their house, there's enough food in there for tomorrow morning for breakfast. They don't keep, young people do not keep groceries in their house, and they are the hardest people to convince that they really need to prepare, that they need some food in there in case something happens. Because guess what? If the power's off, you can't buy groceries if you want to because the cash registers are electronic, and so they'll be closed. There's nothing that you can do about that. But that is one reason. And cocoa is doubling in price practically. Anything that you can think of that is a staple. 3 days will get you through another emergency. Once you build up 3 days worth of emergency, go for 2 weeks. Go for a month. Go for 6 months. Go for a year. It's a slow process. If you buy an extra can every time you go to the grocery store, just buy 1 extra can. Buy 2 extra cans. You don't have to go out and spend $1,000 at one time to stock up. Beware. You're going to run out of time. You are going to run out of time because things are happening. Now listen, the weather is a very good reason. A very good reason. Because you could have, if you live in Tornado Alley or something like that, that's not where they're confined at now. We have tornadoes that are in areas where we never had tornadoes before. We have hurricanes. Think about what happened to Florida early in the last year, earthquakes in diverse places, as Christ said in Matthew 24. Boy, are earthquakes all over the world right now. Tornadoes, hurricanes, floods. Any amount of rain can bring flood. And all of these can lead to power outages. Now, it depends on the time of the year. Power outages are dark. People used to go to bed at 7 o'clock. Now you know why. But really and truly, you can be cold because it's cold outside. Or you can be too hot to breathe because the air conditioner won't come on. Short term, it's a little inconvenient. Long term, it can completely change your way of life if the power goes out. That's something that a lot of us worry about. Grid down. Grid down, you'll hear that word all over the place now. People are speaking it a lot. Yet there are many other types of emergencies to be prepared for. There's always the unexpected. What happens if someone in your family has a catastrophic illness? Do you know that could lead to medical bills out the wazoo? My husband had a double lung transplant in 1997. I don't know how much they are now, but it was probably about $650,000 for him to have that transplant. And after we came home from Alabama, we had to continue to drive back and forth for years. For years, we had to drive back and forth to Alabama for different things. So the medical bills just kept piling up. And during that time, at that point in time, Medicare didn't pay for the medication for people who had transplants. And I think they started maybe about 5 years before he passed away, and it was really nice because they got very expensive. But you can have loss of income because that person is sick and can't bring their income into the household anymore. Travel expenses, such as we had traveling back and forth to Alabama. Home health care is inevitable when somebody comes home. And the unknown. I just say the unknown because you don't ever know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to go on. If the person passes away, then you'll have funeral expenses. What happens when the money dries up? There's a lot of talk right now about the money and the money shortages and what's going on in our government and the trials to make it into something that you don't actually hold in your hand any longer. Failing stocks right now are a big problem with money. Unexpected job loss. You know, in this small town, a few weeks ago, one company laid off 60 employees, and a lot of them were, important employees in their jobs, but they let go of 60 people, all through different levels of what they had. Loss of government funding, such as Social Security and disability. People who live on Social Security and disability have been dreading the year 2025 because that's the year that's been predicted for about 10 years that the Social Security is going to dry up and there won't be any left for anyone to go on. Past due bills you can't pay. If you don't have money coming in, your bills are going to get behind. Savings, all gone. Then you can't pay your mortgage or your car loan. What are you going to do? You need to be prepared. How do you prepare for money? How do you prepare for money? We've talked about it earlier. You can't just expect to keep money at home and expect that money to be even worth anything in a few years. But you know what you can do is pay off. Work on paying off your bills. Work on paying off your mortgage. Work on paying off your car. Don't go and get anything new right now. Work on paying off what you have and get out of debt. And I will tell you, that is the most important thing that you can do right now. You know, we are living in a time period of, if you watch the news, open borders. Open borders cause a lot of problems, and part of that is terrorism. And let me tell you, I was surprised when I read the statistics on the people who are coming across the border, because I thought that they were from Mexico and from South America, Central America. I thought that's who those people were. No, more than 10,000 migrants come across each day. Did you know that? Today, more than 10,000 migrants are coming across the border every day. And the majority of them are not coming from South America. In 2021, this is an old thing, nearly 40% of the immigrants, which is about 600,000 people, came to the U.S. from Asia, followed by North America at 35%, Europe at 12%, Africa at 6%, and South America at just under 6%. Now, where are all these people at? Why did they come, and where are they at? An immigration watchdog group recently estimated that there are more than 17 million illegal immigrants in the United States. Let's remember that some of these are children that are taken and trafficked across the border. Among those are suspected Chinese, Arab, and Hamas terrorists. Now, a terrorist will attack in different ways. You know, they can just cause problems. They can, we're learning that they're some of the squatters that people are dealing with in their homes. If you go on vacation and you come home, somebody can be in your home. You can't get them out. They have more rights than you do. But they also do things like set bombs. They set fires. They do different things. But they don't have to be within our borders to affect us. If you've seen those beautiful container ships that bring everything to us, They bring our phones. They bring our technology. They bring our clothing, even toilet paper. They bring everything from the other countries over here to the United States. And the terrorists have blown up several of them, and they just went down into the water. Now, let me tell you something. That affects us. That affects us in a big way. It didn't have to be anything particular for you on that boat or ship or whatever they call them, barge. Doesn't have to be anything particularly for you, but the results can be food shortages, like we've discussed, empty shelves at the grocery store, panic buying, which happens a lot. Now that's hoarding. Panic buying is hoarding. And higher prices. And all of this is brought to us because the terrorists know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. It doesn't say that they blow up things that are going to Russia or blow up things that are going anywhere but to the United States. So they know which ones are headed here. Now, we're living in a time right now where war is spoken of on a daily basis. And the FBI warns about it. Our National Defense warns about it. We have several retired generals who are just really trying to get across that we are living in a bad time right now. And a lot of things have changed. They don't have to come over here and blow a nuclear bomb at us, which they could. They have the ability. But that's not necessarily what they could do. They could do a cyber attack, which would put us down, a cyber attack. And they are practicing that every day. They get caught doing it. Now, the FBI recently reported that the expectations of a cyber attack by the Chinese government is very strong. And what they would attack is our power grid. Now, I want you to think about that for just a minute. Just think about that. I don't know if you know exactly what happened in Texas when they had a cyber attack on their power grid a couple of years ago. People died. People froze to death. The power was off for a long time. And the problem is that when they have that big, that large an area is taken off grid, it's hard to get it back. It's hard to get it back up and running because there's so much need for power. And so our grid power in the United States is not in great shape. And to try to start it and restart it and all that, they don't anticipate that it would survive. Think about what that means for us. Off grid down. We can be invaded from without or within. War-aged Chinese nationalists are flooding into America. And everyone believes it is for a reason. The national security says they believe it is for a reason. For an attack from within, not from without. I'm sure everyone's heard of an EMP or an electromagnetic pulse. And the way that can happen is from the natural sun can create one. And I think it did cause a bad time about 80 years ago. But anyone who has the ability to send a bomb up in our atmosphere and let it explode over the United States can cause an EMP. And what that would mean is grid down. You're right. That would mean grid down. Now, I don't know if you heard it or not, but Russian President Putin reported to his people on live TV that he had the capacity to cause a tidal wave to wipe out Europe. And in EMP, which would send America back to the Stone Age. So they are thinking of this. They are planning these things. And what we do we need to be afraid? No. No. Are you going to live your life in fear? No. One day at a time, trust in God. One day at a time, trust in God. But now, there are times when you might need to have an emergency evacuation plan. Now, people who live, and I say Tornado Alley because they, when they go there, if there's a hurricane coming, they will tell you, it's time to evacuate. They're much more prepared than in an area where we are, where we don't have many things where we need to do that. You never know. So if you're listening, and if you're from somewhere else, then you may understand too that sometimes you got to know what to do. Are you going to pack a bag? They call it the bug out bag. Get in your vehicle and drive to a safe location? Or are you going to turn your home into a security forces and stay at home, shelter in place? There's an opportunity to make that decision sometimes in the very beginning, but when you wait too long, you've run out of time. And you need to know what you're going to do. You need to have a plan in place. And so usually people who live in those areas have their plan in place. And it would not hurt us to have the same kind of plan. Do you need to evacuate, or do you need to stay home and shelter in place? Now, one thing that doesn't sound like that you need to be prepared for very much is car trouble. But as a woman who travels by herself sometimes, I want to say that car trouble can be a very serious thing, especially for a woman or a young girl. My granddaughter travels back and forth to South Carolina sometimes on the weekend to see her mother, and I don't care how late she is, I'm up until she gets home because I'm worried to death until I hear her driving the driveway. So your car trouble may be as simple as a flat tire. Can you change a flat tire? I can't. One day the mayor of Elberton changed a flat tire for me. I had him, he was right there, and he changed my flat tire. When my daughter was in high school, she took shop. They made the girls take shop for 6 weeks out of the year. And so he wanted her to change a tire. He displayed it. Everybody had to come up and change a tire. And he wanted her. It was her turn. And she said, no, I'm not doing that. It's nasty. He said, what are you going to do if you have a flat tire? She said, I will do the same thing my mama does. I will call my daddy. But what if you can't get in touch with them? Do you know we have areas where the phone doesn't work? That's why I worry about my granddaughter particularly. So if you're in an area where there is power, just dead, they call them dead zones. Also, what if your phone is dead? One of my granddaughters, her phone is dead, always. It is always dead. Let me tell you something. The entire time you are traveling in your car, it should be plugged up charging the entire time. And especially if you're going somewhere and you're using your GPS, it wipes out your battery. There are also battery charging blocks, and I have one in my purse, but you should always have that charged in your car, one in your car and one in your purse if you're going somewhere. Because if your phone is dead, you can charge your phone. And sometimes in the middle of the night, I know people who do not charge their phone overnight, and you really need that in case something happens if you have lights out. Now, let's say you're stranded on the side of the road. I was at a conference in, can't remember the name of the town. Anyway, I was at a conference up north, and tornado weather was coming through, and so we made it out just fine, but it created on the interstate, for people who were traveling to Alabama, it created a just practically standstill for hours, just for hours. And 3 women who had been at the conference with us, St. Louis, who had been at the conference with us, were on the interstate stranded for hours, and no bathroom. They didn't have anything in the car to drink. They didn't have any snacks in there. You should always carry water and snacks and things like that. But you've got to be prepared for the silliest of things because, on the interstate, that happens a lot. It may not be 3 hours, but it happens a lot. So there are ways to be prepared. If you can reach help, will it be a while before help gets to you? Do you know that people who have car trouble, well, people are faking car trouble and then attacking people that pull over to help. So I suggest you don't pull over to help anybody, especially a single woman. Call 911 and ask for help for them. But don't open your door. Don't unlock your door or roll your window down if somebody pulls over to help you. I mean, that is something that everyone should understand and do that. If you're going to be stranded, possibly, but everybody needs an emergency get-home bag. And that includes water, snacks. It could have Band-Aids in it. It can have any number of things that you might need while you're sitting on the side of the road. Something like hand warmers can seem like a godsend if you're sitting there shivering in the cold. Right? Mm-hmm. Anything that you can do to make your the time that you're stranded more comfortable and safe. Whistles. Nobody thinks of buying whistles now, but every woman should be carrying a whistle in her purse. And if you have children, they should all have whistles around their neck when you're traveling. You can whistle for them. They can whistle for you if they need help in the bathroom or something of that sort. Whistles are something that you should have always. You know, you may know this, you may not. God's Word says, fear not, exactly 365 times. That is one time for every day of our year. 365 times. Fear not. Why? Why do you fear not? He's got you. He's got you right in His hands. He's taking care of you. The only thing you've got to do is trust in Him. Now listen. God said He's going to shake things up in the end days. There's a whole lot of shaking going on right now. Isn't there a whole lot of shaking going on? I'm not just talking about earthquakes either. I am not talking about the volcanoes exploding. I am talking about things that have changed our life. Plagues. Yes, plagues are coming. We've seen them. And look, y'all. We're expecting things. Look, the cicadas. There's going to be 2 levels of cicadas this year. What's it going to do to your garden plan? Make sure you're prepared to protect your garden from the cicadas. Right? If you are not prepared and you haven't thought about it, those things sound like a spaceship has landed out in the yard. I hate those things, and they will eat everything you've got up. They will eat it all up in your yard. So that is a thing that we don't think about. It's part of preparation. But listen, preparation is more than food and water. Prepare for emergencies. Prepare, okay, for instance, you have different needs than I do. Every one of us have different needs when we're thinking about how we need to prepare for an emergency. You might be elderly. You might have small children. If you have a baby, that really changes things up, right? You might be caring for an aged parent or disabled parent, or you could be disabled yourself. If you're in a wheelchair, someone is in a wheelchair, all these things change the way you need to prepare. They change for everybody. Everybody is unique in what they need because it is more than food and water. Now, food is important, isn't it? Food is important. I'm not going to go there and say that it's not. I want to talk to you first about the first thing that you need to do when you start preparing for emergencies. This is a very bright notebook. I don't know if you probably can't read it, but it says grab and go on the side. It doesn't have to say that because I know. Don't get a discreet notebook. Don't think of, I'm hiding it from people. Get something that stands out that you can see and grab and go. Now, inside that notebook, you're going to want to have contacts and phone numbers. What if your phone's not working and you need to use somebody else's phone? You need the contacts and the phone numbers. Personal documents. You need to have copies of your marriage license, birth certificates, all of that stuff. Have yourself good copies. This is a good place to keep them instead of the file cabinet. You know, you've got everything in there. If you've got firearms, it's a good place to keep the serial numbers. I mean, it's very important. And I will have this list soon on my website of things that you should have in here. You should have medical documents, copies of your health cards, copies of your immunization records. They've anticipated that pretty soon you won't be able to travel without that little thing, copies of what you had your immunized with. But everything that you need. What if you need maps for your area? If you live in a larger area and you use your GPS a lot, how about a map to get you there? Now, the second book that you need to have is an emergency book. And the reason that I say you need an emergency book is I give out a lot of things from FEMA. What to do in an earthquake, what to do in a hurricane, what to do for a tornado, how to prepare for all these things. And this is a good place for that. Now, you also need a first aid book. And if that first aid book fits in this notebook, that's just fine. Now, also, I want to tell you what. If you've got, in this book right here, you need family photos. You need, if you have 5 children, you want a photo with each one of your children. You and the child together. That way, if anything happens and somebody tries to take your child during the confusion and the chaos, you can prove that's your child. Same with your pet. Make sure you have a photo of you and your dog's records and that sort of thing. Now, in your emergency book, you're going to have everything you need that will tell you what to do in case of emergency. Do you know how to set a broken bone? Some of us do. Do you know how to fix a sprained ankle? Some of us do. You know, there's any number of things, and if you have the directions for emergencies in here, then you'll be a lot better off. Now, you can go to the store and buy yourself a composition book that has 5 sections in it. And you can start out that way, and it's easy. Okay, I'm too extra for that. Okay, so I like separate things, natural medicines, my garden planning, preserving, different ways of preserving. Now let me talk to you about preserving. You don't have to be a farmer to preserve food. You can go to farmers markets and buy it. You can buy it from the grocery store if that's what you want to do. And you can preserve food in many different ways. Now, one of the ways that you can preserve it is by putting it in your freezer. And that's predominantly what we do, right? We freeze everything. So, let me just tell you that after about 4 hours, the food in your freezer starts decomposing. Yes. And so, do you know that we had a power outage in Elbert County several weeks ago now, and people began to get a little distressed when they discovered, by talking back and forth with family members, that it was not just Hardy MC. It was Elberton Net and Georgia Power. What kind of power outage covers 3 different power companies? It was a big one, and it was scary. And when the lights didn't come back on in another hour, people were beginning to just get a little bit worried and say, oh, is this it? It was actually like 3 or 4 hours before the power came back on. I, who am prepared and who have trained for this and studied for this, never considered looking in my freezer and making sure everything was okay. Never considered it. Never thought about it. And I'm going to tell you something else too. I have things like flashlights and batteries and things that I will encourage you to have, but I put them in a plastic drawer in my sunroom. And I couldn't get to them. Luckily, I keep these in the nightstand drawer. And they put, you can't tell here, but they put out a good bit of light. This is $1.25 at the Dollar Tree. You can't beat that. This is also $1.25. It looks like a flip the switch on, flip it off for your bathroom or your bedroom if you need it. These are $1.25. These are altar candles. If you get one without Jesus on it, it works fine. I keep these in my bathrooms, always. But let me just say that you need to be prepared, and everything needs to be where you can get to it. Okay, but back to the freezing. The problem with freezing our food, and look, I have 2 freezers. The problem with freezing our food is that if the lights go out, you have a limited amount of time to save it. You have a limited amount of time to save it. Same goes for the food in your refrigerator and the freezer on your refrigerator. You have a limited time, and then you're going to be in a big crunch to do something else with it. Now, the next thing you can do is what's called water bath canning, and that is usually with acidic foods, jellies and fruits and things like that you do water bath canning. Now, Michelle, you told me your mom did chicken in the water bath canning, That's right. And they didn't have pressure canners 100 years ago, did they? They did not have pressure canners. And so that is a popular choice. And the Amish, I've been watching a lot of things on YouTube, and the Amish, that's how they do it. You can also do pressure canning. I have not an Instapot, but it's something very similar to it, and it's like a pressure cooker, and that's what I do my canning in. The problem is it only holds this size jars. My favorite way to store food is dehydrating, and I buy deer meat from friends at church who are hunters. This is dehydrated. I don't know if you can hear it. This is dehydrated deer meat, and it's scrambled and then dehydrated, and you can put it with anything, and it does, when you put it in water and soups, it does come back, right? It gets salty and it does come back. Now, I do canned deer meat too, but I like the dehydrated part of it. Now, this is orange slices, and this is dehydrated. Yes, they can be reconstituted. You can eat them like this, so they become very sweet. Yeah, and you can eat them like this. This is what happens if you take them and grind them into powder. And Michelle was asking me, yes, you can use this as zest. You can put it in a milkshake, in a drink, or anything, Watch how different it is to store. This is about 2 pounds of deer meat. That's about 2 pounds. It's only 2/3 full. Okay. This is about 2 of these jars right here. That half amount is 2 of these jars ground up. So it does save a lot. Now, another thing that I save is teas. And I have a lot of different kind of teas. I'm not an herbalist, and so I can't go around making my own. But you can buy them online or at Walmart, and just make sure that you seal them in a jar so they're airtight and they last just about indefinitely, right? And they're for everything from sore throats to constipation or whatever you might need, and that could come in pretty handy during that kind of time. But preserving food, freeze drying. Freeze drying is the most expensive way to go. I'd love to have a freeze dryer. They're probably about $3,000. It's a little bit out of my own personal budget, but they're fantastic if you could go that way. Now, I want you to know that preparing is about more than food and water. Okay, it really is more than food and water. You plan and keep your records. You got to be ready for anything. For fire, have you had a house catch on fire? I have. It is the most horrible thing. I still don't. In the middle of the night, if something wakes me up and there's lights in an unexpected place, it freaks me out really bad. You never get over a fire, do you? You just never get over a house fire. But you got to be ready for that. Be ready for anything. Lighting, cooking, staying warm. Now, listen. What would you do if the power was off? Do you have the ability to cook inside the house or outside the house, during that point in time? Some men, that's not a problem. They got their grill, they fire that thing up, they're ready to go. But now, things do run out. The tanks run out. Also be aware that you cannot cook with everything in the house because it causes fumes that can really kill you. So there are only certain things that you can use inside the house, certain things that you can use outside the house. Believe it or not, I think we left the bag at home. Believe it or not, tea candles can cook a meal. Little bitty tea candles. Or at the Dollar Tree, you can buy the little canisters of oil, or they're like alcohol. And you know that if you go to something at church, a lot of times they'll have those little cans under the dishes, keep them warm. You know, things like that are not expensive. Thank you. Sterno is the word. But things like that are not expensive, and you know, you can, you'd be surprised what you can do. I just want to say this, that you've got to always be aware of what's going on around you. Always be aware of what's going on around you. And no, we don't like watching our news, because our news doesn't make sense anymore. The people telling the news don't make sense. And I watch news from Australia. I really do. I get more out of it than that. But I'll scroll the headlines. And that way, at least you'll get an idea about what is going on in the country and if things are happening. Preparation can mean more than anything I've got here. It can be more than emergency things. It can be more than just comforting things. You know, it's about the well-being of your mind, body, and spirit. Always. You've got to have that. And not just you, but your children, your family, you know, physical, mental, and spiritual health. And so we were talking a little bit earlier about the number of teenage suicides in the country now. And it's predominantly because what happened in the pandemic. They were separated from their friends and they could not take the isolation. And so the teenage, and some of them never have recovered. They just never recovered from it. But above everything else, you know, you want to trust in God. You just want to trust in God. A lights out box is something that everybody should have. Now, some people call it a blackout box, right? Start with a shoebox. Put you some flashlights and batteries in there and have it where you can get to it easily. Here's a pointer. Do not store your batteries inside your flashlight, because it corrodes and it ruins your flashlight. Been there, you know. So just be careful about that. But you should have that. Start small and build up. Build up until you've got all kinds of things in that blackout box. And this is your 24-hour, 3-day, whatever. If your power goes out, all of a sudden you've got everything you need. Some people put food and water in their blackout box just because it's going to be right there together and they don't have to worry about it. Now, one thing that I tell people to prepare with is, can you garden? Michel can. He has amazing thing. I'm learning, okay? I'm learning, and I had a beautiful garden last year for the first time in 3 years, and my well went out, and the whole thing dried up and died because we could not water it. It was just so frustrating. But start a garden. If you cannot do it any other way, buy you some $1.25 pots and start towers. You know, do it in buckets, do it in pails, whatever way you can. Grow something, do something. There's a homestead said do something.
And don't put anything in that after the cicadas are gone.
Good point. Michelle said don't put it in until the cicadas are gone. That is a really good point. I think they're supposed to move up north really quickly. 3 weeks. 3 weeks? Good job. Good job. Also, I can attest to the necessity of investing in the correct plastic container to put your items in, especially if you're going to store outside or in a basement or whatever. I have a squirrel problem. I have a yard full of trees, and the squirrels are everywhere. And so they managed to get inside my office building, and the little handles on the side of those big plastic totes, they chewed in the handle part that sticks out like this and destroyed documents and writings. Thank goodness that they were on, well, some of them weren't actually, but the destruction was unbelievable, and I had thought that these were very safe. I now feel like the safest thing, if you're going to put it somewhere besides your closet, if you're going to put it in an attic or a basement or in an outside building, you really should buy those really heavy plastic, black plastic with the yellow things, and that's just about as best as you can do. Okay, another thing, have you thought about washing your clothes? We don't think about that. But if you had to, I remember when our washing machine went out, my mom washed the clothes of 5 children, and she didn't have that. She just washed them in the bathtub. And she would give me one end and twist, and twist and twist. It's no wonder she had a bad back, I'm going to tell you that. But a lady on TV that I like to watch, she showed her outside. She's off-grid. She lives off-grid. And so she showed her outside how she washes clothes. And she purchased one of those utility sinks with 2 sides to it. And so she has that. The drain just goes away from it so the mud's not underneath it. And she purchased the ringer and set it up in the middle of it. And she washes her clothes. She even has a fire section where she can heat her water to pour in there. And I thought, wow, she's really set up, but she's accustomed to it. So in a case of emergency, what would we do? That's something to think about. It's really something to think about. Okay, in the first aid kit, I want to show you this. When I did Girl Scouts, this was my first aid kit for the Girl Scouts. And it's very inexpensive. It came from Walmart. It has just the basic things in it. And I still have this hanging over one of the doors in the house because it's right there, and I keep it refilled, and it's right there where you need it. But we have some under the car seats. We have a larger one. You want to make sure that you have more than just Band-Aids. This is a lot of different types of Band-Aids. But this is a hot or cold warmer. Listen, you got pain, that's pretty good. Sprained ankles, there's any number of things that you could have, but start off with the basics. Just start off with the basics and build. And you might have, let's say, a heavy wound care. You might have heavy wound care box that's all by itself, a shoe box that you keep in a different location. But listen, just start with something small. What do you need? A pack of Band-Aids. Just start with something small, something to clean the wound with. Maybe you want plastic gloves to make it sterile. If you have somebody in your family, we're lucky now because they're given 3 months prescription on medication, which is really good. But now, we're lucky now. But if you have someone in your family who has medications, you really need to be prepared for that. And let me tell you something. If you have a toothache, there's nothing like a tube of Orajel. There's nothing like having something to put on to keep from getting infection if the child gets cut or on the knee, something that deadens the pain a little bit. If you live in a mosquito-ridden area, there's nothing like something that keeps the mosquitoes away. You know what I'm saying? Be prepared. And these things don't have to be for a year. They just mean think about what you need and have them in place. Now, let's get serious and talk about the prepping. Number 1, this is the biggest rule. Do not talk about your preps. Especially to strangers, but even to friends, even people you go to church with. I am so amazed at the number of people who have YouTube channels who proudly show the rooms that they have their preps in. When push comes to shove, they're gonna have trouble. They're gonna have troubles. Could be the government. Because did you know that your local government can come and take your groceries and put them all in a stockpile? This is a law. They can come and get your groceries and stockpile them in the town and divide them out evenly among the people. That is a very old law, but it's still in place. That's why you don't want anybody to know what you got. You do not want anybody to know what you got. Don't talk about your preps. That person who's sat next to you in church could be the person that shows up with a gun because he wants to feed his family and he's desperate. Do you understand what I'm saying? Don't make a big deal of stocking food that you don't eat. Okay. If your family does not eat beans and rice, why in the world would you fill your pantry up with it? Because they're not going to eat it then either. You could say, okay, if they starve, they could eat it. Here's a rule. Store only what you eat and eat what you store. Create an inventory record. Use a notebook and create an inventory record of everything you have and where it's located. That way you know when you move from one thing to another. Use your extended pantry as your grocery store. When you shop from the real grocery store, put it in the extended pantry and rotate. Dates are very important. Dates are very important. Listen, that date does not mean it's time to throw it away. The best buy date, people are confused. Best buy is the best day to sell it by. It's not the best day to eat it by. You know, it's not the best day to eat it. But now I will tell you this. After a couple of years, tomato-based products begin to take on an aluminum taste. Have you noticed that? Yeah. They begin to take on an aluminum taste. You'd rather have cans that you have to open with a can opener. They last longer than the flip top cans do. That's just a little thing. Dates, I put dates on the front of every can. I look at the bottom, see what the date is, and I write it with a magic marker on there. And then I put it back and forth and see which is the oldest. Now, I'm going to tell you something. The thing that just breaks my heart is when I hear people say, we used to prep, but then the food got old and we had to throw it away. Because you're not eating it. Yeah, I just can't get that at all. Because people throw away hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of food. You have to rotate. You have to rotate and get it in there. Now, when you talk about hoarding, if you go to the grocery store and you want 10 cans of green beans, and there are 8 cans on the shelf, what are you going to do? Leave one? I would buy half. I would buy half and leave half.
Now, there are some exceptions to that. That's me.
There are exceptions to that. Back during the baby food crisis, I had a grandbaby, and there were 2 cans, and I got both of them. I will just tell you that I did that. So there can be exceptions, but that is hoarding. Don't buy everything on the shelf. Don't buy everything on the shelf. Go to another store and buy some there. You know. Also, dust and examine your stuff. I didn't even know this, okay, until I heard a man talk about it, and I checked, and sure enough, who dusts their canned goods, you know? But dust causes moisture, and either on your home canned products or on the aluminum canned products, it can cause rust, which can go down in and ruin the food. So you want to be aware of that, and dust if you need to, but examine it at regular intervals. If you have an aluminum can and the top is poked up, throw that thing away. You don't even need to open it to test it or anything. I just want to say that these are unusual times. I never thought when I was young that I would be living in times like these, where you even had to think about something like this. We didn't think about things like this. Now, I admit I always had more than one day worth of groceries in the house. I'm just a little bit different than that. But we didn't think that the world was going to be headed in the way it is now. The confusion, the hatred, just the absolute anger that people are living in all over the world right now. And we never thought that it would be like this. But it is. And look, I have a shirt that says, normal is it coming back, Jesus says. Because the normal that we knew is never coming back. It's never coming again. We're going to have a new normal. There's going to be a new normal. And I know that deep in my spirit. When is the Lord coming back? We don't know. We do not know. But all the signs that he gave in Matthew 24 are coming to pass with such rapidity that it really makes you pause and think. If you are a Christian and you know the Lord and you are not thinking about where we are now, then I worry about you. Now listen, you may not encounter an emergency during your lifetime. Lord may come back and take us all. None of this is going to matter. Nothing's going to hurt us. We don't get affected by it. If not, praise God. But, just in case, wouldn't you like to be prepared? Just in case. Are you ready? Are you ready for anything? I'm not. We've got a long way to go. It is a process. Pray, trust God, and prepare. This is how we do it. Father, I thank you so much for the privilege of being here. Lord, if anyone is watching out there and they need help, Lord, then I ask you to give it to them. Right now, Lord, we know that the most important thing that we have to do is not to just prepare our households, but to prepare the souls of the people we meet. We are to spread your gospel, Lord. And I pray that we reach people, Lord, that we reach people who need you, Lord, that need to hear about you, Lord. Touch them. I thank you for the privilege of being here. I thank you, Lord, for Diane and Michel and Bill, and I thank you for CrossSounds Ministry, Lord. And I receive your blessings, Lord, and I spread it to the people who are listening. In Jesus' holy, precious name, amen.
Yeah, good
I was
job.
all over the place, wasn't I?
No, it was great.
Was it great? Thank you.
Awesome.
That's the whole